event. I will be trying to do some translation as well, and I will ask our guests to introduce themselves. This, of course, as you well know, has been a super election year. What does that mean? It means that a vast majority of the world's population has gone to the polls this year. The latest one being the United States, but also Mexico. And this has drastically altered a lot of the panorama in terms of climate change policy and what that looks like. So in this panel, we're going to look at what G20 countries who have had an important role to play in deciding and determining climate policy, what their thoughts are on what this super election year has had in consequence with this reality. But I'm going to ask each of our guests to present themselves because they'll probably do a far better job than I could possibly do. Sir, could you introduce yourself? Oh, yeah.
Hi, I'm Takashi Hongo. I'm senior fellow of the private company's think tank. I work for the private sector and providing advice on corporate strategy. In addition to the advising of corporate, I have been involved in some government policy making process because I have rich experience in emission trading. So now Japan is considering to adopt emission trading system. So I have been there. Thank you very much. Sorry, one thing I forget about. I'm advising to Global Japan. Very important thing I forget. Sorry.
Arigato.
Thanks. I'm Joydeep Gupta.
I'm going
Okay.
to ask if you guys can project a little bit. Because
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm Joydeep Gupta. I'm a journalist. I've been covering environmental issues for a long time, including climate change for a long time. I'm from India, and nowadays, for the last few years, I spend much of my time training younger journalists how to cover environment. So here we have, like in other crops, we have 20 journalists who are our trainees, the fellows from all over Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And Eastern Europe this time, yes. A lot of from Eastern Europe.
Thank you very much.
Hola, mi nombre es Sergio Augusto López Ramírez. No hablo inglés. Voy a hablar despacio.
Sergio Lopez Augusto Ramirez doesn't speak English, but he will speak slowly and I will be translating for you.
Yo soy de México. Soy político y vengo a platicarles aquí cómo fueron las anteriores elecciones en México este año.
He's from Mexico. He used to be a politician, and he's going to speak to us about how the election process was carried out in Mexico this very year. I'm going to ask you a favor. Since you're going to speak Spanish and I'm going to translate for you, can I ask you two to swap, please?
¿Nos cambiamos?
Sí, por favor. Perdona. Era así, eso puedo ver si puedo hacer simultáneamente.
Quiero decirles que estoy muy contento en esta COP.
He'd like to say he's very happy at this COP.
He estado en todas las COP desde 1992 en Río de Janeiro hasta ahora.
He's been in all the COPs since 1992 till this day.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Bueno, without further ado, what does a super election year like this mean for the G20 in general?
Yes, the climate change, I think the industry's action is very important, but the policy, without the policy, good policy signals, industry cannot move forward. So the policy is important. So the super election year, so I think the positive side or negative side, anyway, the policy on the climate change of each country may be affected by the election. So from that point of view, here, now we are at COP29 here, so the many countries' election already finished. So now we can carefully review about what kind of policy from next year we can see, and the industry can follow the policy signal from the countries.
And from a Japanese perspective,
Oh yeah,
what does this look like? Did you guys have elections this year?
yeah.
When were your elections?
Yes, this year we understand as a super election year, but at least I myself, I thought Japan will don't have an election. However, unfortunately, by the kind of scandals, so the prime minister are obliged to retire from prime ministers. So the general election was made last month. So due to the scandal issues, the prime minister are obliged to resign. That means a ruling party losing a big number of seats. But still, they are in the administration position. Even though the minority ruling party, but perhaps getting support from some of the opposition group, and they can continue their policy.
And Japan is one of not only G20 but G7, and also a country that relies a lot on gas and imports and like that. What role does it have to play in terms of climate policy? Do you see Japan changing its position in terms of leadership for climate?
Yes, the ruling party still they can continue to their administration role. So I think that it's up to some of the small the opposition group's decision, but I think generally speaking can continue the policy side. So not only the domestic policy, but also in international policy, particularly the collaboration with the Asian countries. So because of the Asian situation, Japan knows very well, and maybe the Southeast Asia, for instance, the surrounding economy in the industry structure, energy structure are different from other world. Not the same as Japan, not same as the US, not same as the European Union, not same as Latin Americas. So how to collaborate with the ASEAN country, that is still the very important policy, climate policy of Japan, because the Japanese emission is very small and the space for renewable is limited. So goal is net zero. So they need to have a collaboration with other countries.
That's very interesting that you mentioned the leadership of Japan in Southeast Asia and East Asia. I'd like to use that to segue into Mr. Gupta. What about India as a regional leader in Southern Asia, also considering Prime Minister Modi's victory and the reassurance of another term? What does that look like for the future of climate change? India has made great inroads in terms of adaptation, but still coal is one of its main sources of energy. What role does it play as a regional leader, as a G20 leader, and what does climate look like for India?
I personally, well, to start with, I do not speak for the government of India. I'm an independent journalist. So from my point of view, as a journalist, I find India's role in regional climate cooperation very poor. It has a lot to do with the fact that there are other issues, mostly India-Pakistan tensions, which affect cooperation in all areas, including climate. It is most unfortunate because climate is definitely a transnational issue. When it comes to leadership in G20 or more general leadership in G77 countries, India has been playing a more constructive role since the start of the negotiations in the early 1990s. I think India has played an important role in pointing out that the issues of climate justice, the issues of international climate reparations, and now increasingly the issue of climate finance.
And it was India, I understand, that was one of the sticking points during the Paris Agreement because, rightly so, they said, well, the West has developed this far and now it's our turn. What does that stance look like now for India firstly and also for G20 countries beyond that are in the developing world, or rather the global south?
Yeah, the thing is that there is no uniform global south. Uh, so when it comes to countries, the big developing countries, India, Mexico, uh, Indonesia, Malaysia, they are trying their best to leapfrog the system, the fossil fuel economy, and move to a cleaner economy. And it is countries like them, which are the big countries, which can get the funding, the investments to do so. It's not easy, it's not cheap, they are in trouble, but at least they can get it. The big problems area countries are the least developed countries, many countries in the Africa group, the small island developing states, which are simply not getting the money that they need to move towards a clean economy.
And India is a member of the BRICS. What role does it have to play? Because it's one of the leaders of the rising giants of the new economy. What would India's role be in that, in terms of also, because financing, yes, is important, but it could also be coming from, say, a BRICS development bank.
Yes, there is definitely a case for pushing clean energy harder, whether it's in BRICS or BASIC or any of these developing country groups. Uh, there is the International Solar Alliance that India has started for this purpose. It definitely does its best to do that. It also struggles with funding issues. So India has committed to generating 500 gigawatts, which is about half its requirements, through non-fossil fuel sources by 2030, which I think is one, if not the most ambitious, perhaps one of the most ambitious plans that any country has. And it's moving very fast. It is actually right now the uh, capacity of India to have renewable energy has just last month crossed 200 gigawatts. So it will manage, I think, to get to that 500 gigawatt mark. And that will be important, because at the end of the day, it's the third highest emitter in the world. So that will be important, but it's not enough. India needs to do more to help other developing countries as well as itself.
Thank you. Ahora vamos a pasar a México. ¿Sabes qué? Vamos a intentar lo de la traducción simultánea, si te parece.
Sí.
Entonces, yo hablo en el micrófono, tú aleja un poco el micrófono para que no haya eso.
Sí,
Te
perfecto.
voy a hacer la pregunta en inglés primero y después en español. ¿Vale? So my question to you, Mexico has recently acquired a new president, the first female president in its history, Ms. Sheinbaum, right?
Yeah.
And I believe she was a UNFCCC climate scientist. So this offers a lot of hope in terms of what the climate policy that Mexico has to offer. Esta es la primera presidenta que ha tenido México. Entiendo que ella es una científica de la UNFCCC, o más bien científica climática. ¿Eso qué significa de cara a la política mexicana y al impacto que puede tener México de cara al cambio climático?
Muy bien.
Well,
Mexico tiene por primera
as
vez
for its first time,
una mujer presidenta
a female president
en un país
in a country
de 130 millones
of
de habitantes.
130 million people.
Ganaron también la mitad del Congreso mujeres
They
y la mitad hombre.
also half the Congress is now female.
Y México,
And Mexico,
un país muy grande y megadiverso,
very big and mega diverse country,
es la primera
is the
vez
first time
que una mujer presidenta
a female president
es científica
is a scientist
y ambientalista.
and an environmentalist.
Lleva 5 semanas en el poder
She has been in power for 5 weeks.
y ya hizo el primer cambio
And she
constitucional.
has already made the first constitutional change.
Bienestar animal, no maltrato a los
Animal
animales.
welfare, no harm to animals.
Ella
She
tiene varias
has
vistas
several viewpoints
cómo combatir el tema del cambio
on how
climático.
to combat climate change.
Y tiene el apoyo de los
And
parlamentarios.
she has the support of parliamentarians.
Ella basa su política
She
en el
bases her
desarrollo
policy
sustentable.
on sustainable development.
Salud,
Health,
energía,
energy,
agricultura,
agriculture,
biodiversidad.
biodiversity.
Ay, se me escapa el otro, Y
I'm slipping the other one.
desarrollo
But
sostenible,
also sustainable development,
que es
which is
todo programa y acción
all programs and actions
tiene que tener sentido económico.
which make economic sense.
Segundo, tiene que tener
Secondly,
sentido
they
de
need to
aceptación
have
cultural.
a cultural acceptance.
Tiene que
They
beneficiar a la
have to
gente
benefit the
cercana
people on the ground,
y tiene que respetar todas las leyes
and
ambientales.
it must respect all environmental laws.
Y además que
And
lo regule el
It
gobierno.
must also be regulated by government.
México es un país que tiene 32 estados
Mexico is a country with 32 states
y tiene todos los climas
and has all variety of climates,
y además sí tiene grandes problemas
and
del
yes, has
ataque al medio ambiente.
big environmental problems and attacks on the environment.
Pero los mexicanos confiamos
But us Mexicans, we believe
en que la presidenta Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo
that the President Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo
va a atacar todos
will tackle each and every one
con presupuestos, leyes y
with
programas.
budgets, laws, and programs.
Y los partidos políticos que le ayudamos a ganar
And the political parties who helped her get to power
son tres.
are three:
Morena,
Morena,
Partido Verde Ecologista de México,
the Green Ecologist Party of Mexico,
yo soy del
to
Partido
which he
Verde,
belongs,
y Partido del Trabajo.
and of course the Workers' Party.
También la presidenta ha apoyado
Equally,
mucho
the President has also supported
una Secretaría del Medio Ambiente,
a Secretariat of the Environment,
la cual también trabaja la mitad hombres y la mitad
in which is
mujeres.
also composed half of male and half female workers.
Entonces, creemos que México por primera vez
Therefore, we believe that Mexico, for the first time,
estará en los top
shall
del
lead
cuidado del medio
in
ambiente.
terms of environmental protection.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Ahora, in terms of the composition of the parliament, you said it's half female, half male, but also Ms. Schaubaum's party is clearly in the rule. What tangible things can we expect in terms of climate policy? And also considering that Mexico has oil and gas projects active. Dado la compostura del Parlamento, que es femenino y masculino también, y la presencia del partido de la presidenta, y considerando que hay proyectos de petróleo y gas en México, ¿qué se puede esperar tangiblemente de cara a el liderazgo mexicano, tanto domésticamente como internacionalmente?
México tiene políticas
Mexico has policies,
internacionales
international policies,
de mucho respeto.
which are greatly respected.
México es pacifista
Mexico is a pacifist country,
y de México se espera
and people expect from Mexico
que ataque
for it to tackle
el cambio de energías
the
renovables.
energy transition towards renewables.
México tiene mucho potencial en hidrocarburos,
Mexico has a lot of fossil fuel potential.
pero la presidenta también tiene la voluntad de trabajar las
However,
energías
the president
renovables.
also has the will to work on renewable energies. Muchas gracias. Y de
Muchas
cara a
gracias.
su liderazgo internacional,
De cara a su
With regards to
liderazgo
its international
internacional, México
Mexico
va a buscar el intercambio con todos los
will
países
look
posibles,
for an exchange with as many countries as possible,
en especial
specifically
Estados
the
Unidos
United States
y China,
and China.
y los países de
And of
Sudamérica
course,
como
the
Colombia y
countries of South
Brasil.
America like Colombia and Brazil. And now that you mentioned the United States, como ha mencionado Estados Unidos, ¿qué opina usted ahora con la victoria de Donald Trump? ¿Qué reto supone esto? ¿Cómo va a cambiar la relación? ¿Cómo ve eso? Now that you've just mentioned the United States, what does the recent election of Donald Trump represent for Mexico? Does this change the panorama? What are the challenges that Mexico can face? And climate change. Y también, ¿qué retos puede enfrentarse el cambio climático de cara a esta realidad?
Donald Trump, electo presidente de los Estados Unidos,
Donald Trump, President-elect of the United States,
lleva una relación fuerte con México
has a very strong relationship with Mexico.
y creemos que le va a
And we
ir bien a
believe
México.
that Mexico will do well.
¿Por qué?
Because
Porque Estados Unidos tiene
the
muchas
United States has
inversiones
a lot of investments
en México.
in Mexico.
¿Por qué ganó Donald Trump?
Why did Donald Trump win?
Porque el bolsillo de los norteamericanos
the
estaba
United
muy
States
afectado.
citizens' pocket was the bottom line.
Y cambiarán las políticas públicas también en bien del
And
medio
public
ambiente.
policy will be changed in benefit of the environment. By who? ¿Quién cambia esas políticas?
Ambos países a través del Tratado de Libre Comercio que tienen entre los tres países.
Both countries will do this through the FTA, the free trade agreement that has been signed by these countries and Canada.
Canadá, México y Estados Unidos.
Muchas
Muchas
gracias.
gracias.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, would you like to add to any of this?
Yes, I stress on international collaboration is necessary for reaching to the zero goal. But the Indian colleague, Mr. Gupta, said India is not so keen to having international collaboration. But I don't think so, because I found one good signal from the change of policy after election. So the prime minister, they are not so keen to having the collaboration, but now the India government set a kind of the rule for international emission trading. So the domestic carbon pricing system is installing and improving. But in addition to that one, what kind of reduction can be exported to international carbon market? So exporting the emission reduction to the international market, that means technology and financial investment go into the Indian carbon market. That means supporting the emission reduction in India. This is a really important thing. So I'm not sure, but Japan and the Indian government are discussing about collaboration agreement through the usage of the international emission trading. So I think this year's COP, even after the super election year, very important thing is financing, but in particular is emission trading. So that not only between India and Japan, but also many other countries, how to use international emission trading. So this is an analogy of the benefit of trade, international trade, and the division of works. So how to reduce emission as quickly as possible and with a low-cost approach. That is international emission trading. So I think this year's COP, I expected to have a good outcome about the rule of Article 6. That is the rule of the emission trading.
Exactly, but I understand that Article 6, which is the article that deals with emissions trading, has been a bit of a sticking point, COP after COP after COP. And in fact, I understand in these past 2 days, it's been one of the things that has kept delegates in the rooms next to us up till 3 in the morning. Yeah. Have you been privy to that process? And can you tell us a bit about Article 6 specifically?
Yeah, not only the Article 6, but the important thing is all countries need to have carbon pricing. So each country's approach is different, technology are different. However, by the collaboration, the more important thing is there. So just international emission trading is not enough. So the combination with international emission trading and domestic or national system, that is important. So particularly India and Mexico, ASEAN and Japan, the many countries are now the adopting and improving the national system. This is a good thing for using the international emission trading.
Thank you. Mr. Gupta, would you like to add to that?
Yes, okay. First, I have to apologize to you for not making myself clear. I did not say that India is not doing international collaboration. It is very much. What I said was, it's not being very successful in South Asia because of other reasons. But yes, there is a lot of international collaboration. There are two things I want to say. One is on emissions trading, since that has been raised. Emissions trading is, I think, crucial because it's very clear now. And now the numbers that even FCCC is putting out is around $6 trillion required to handle climate between now and 2030. Obviously, there's not enough public money for this. It has to come from private sources. And emissions trading is obviously one of the very, very major ways to go. And all for it. My worry about it is that carbon emissions have an unrealistically low price at the moment. That is why emissions trading is not working as well as it should. And that is where policymakers like you have a big role to play. Carbon emissions need to have realistic prices. If they do, if various parliaments in various countries give policy signals, if not actually mandate that, then that will help emissions trading in a very, very big way. The other thing I wanted to say was that since I have a chance to talk to legislators here, and you were talking about a super election year. As a journalist and a media trainer, one of the things I noted throughout the election process in almost all these countries are journalists writing, why isn't climate change a bigger issue in the campaigns? They kept writing that. And politicians were sometimes dismissive of this, sometimes defensive about it. But when you actually analyze the campaigns, you will realize that not a single candidate dared to ignore climate change. They did not use that phrase, climate change. But not a single candidate anywhere in any country, rich or poor, dared to not to talk about water issues, not to talk about food issues, and not to talk about, in tropical countries, heat stress. Water issues are getting worse in every country of the world, rich, poor, everywhere. And it was a campaign issue in just about everywhere. So I think it's very important that politicians, when they are in power, make that connection between what their voters are telling them, that water is becoming a massive problem, whether it's over too much water or too little water. Both are becoming bigger problems every day thanks to climate change. That's what their voters are telling them. And I would say legislators need to respond.
And then what does that look like? What does that response need to look like?
Better adaptation, far better adaptation, which can essentially come through micro water harvesting techniques, because that's what you need to do to handle what's happening. Because what exactly is happening as a result of climate change is more frequent and more intense floods, droughts, and storms. So to handle that, you'll need more micro water harvesting schemes.
Okay, and I'm going to get a bit controversial here. Last year at the Dubai COP, the Dubai Declaration talked about the need for a phase down of fossil fuels, because this has been slated 2024 as the hottest year on record. We've surpassed 1.5, which was what had been agreed in Paris. What role do parliaments, especially in countries that, like the G20 countries, that consume a lot or the vast majority of these fossil fuels, have in that actual implementation of fossil fuel phase down? Not phase out, because we know we need fossil fuels well into the future for several things. But what role does the G20 have in actually enacting a fossil fuel phase out, especially countries that produce coal or countries that produce oil and gas like Mexico? I'm going to say it in Spanish just for our Mexican colleague. Okay? dado los eventos que estamos experimentando de sequías, de inundaciones en todas partes del mundo, incluso México sufrió una ola de calor muy tremenda, la COP del año pasado habló de una necesidad de ir alejándonos de los hidrocarburos. ¿Qué papel deben jugar países del G20, que son los que más consumen hidrocarburos, que directamente están creando el tema climático que estamos viendo? ¿Qué podemos hacer de cara a eso? ¿Y qué papel juegan los parlamentarios, los representantes, los parlamentos del mundo en ese sentido? I will give you the floor and then please after.
¿Empiezo?
Sí, y tú hablas fluidamente que yo te voy traduciendo.
Los parlamentarios en México
Parliamentarians in Mexico
son 500 parlamentarios
are
en la
500
Cámara de
parliamentarians
Diputados
in the chamber
y 128
and
senadores.
120 senators.
Sumados todos,
All together,
han hecho
they
políticas
have made
públicas
public policies
y muchas leyes en
and
favor
lots of
de proteger el medio ambiente.
trying to protect the environment.
En especial,
Especially
pedir a los
Asking
gobiernos
for governments
que cambien sus
to change their
prácticas,
practices,
empezando con la movilidad.
starting with mobility.
Su transporte de hidrocarburos pasen a transporte
From moving
eléctrico.
from fossil fuel vehicles to electric vehicles.
En especial voy a decir en
Specifically
Sonora,
in
que es
Sonora,
donde yo vengo,
which is where I am from,
hay una electrolinera muy grande, gratuita ya
there
para
is
cargar
a big
los
electric
vehículos.
plant to swap out vehicles.
En México también
In Mexico,
se está pidiendo que
we
los
are
gobiernos
also asking governments
cambien la
change
iluminación,
the lighting,
separen la basura,
separate trash,
cero plásticos, cero PET,
no more plastics, PEPs,
y en especial se cuide mucho el agua.
and specifically take care of the water.
Esto hace que México vaya también
This makes it Mexico
impactando al ciudadano
also
para que también
impacts
participe
upon the citizen
en
who
proteger el
can
medio
take
ambiente,
part in the protection of the environment.
más que castigando, premiando y
Not
ayudando.
so much the stick, but better the carrot.
Pongo un ejemplo.
I'll give you an example.
A la gente con muy poco dinero
People with very little money
se le regala paneles solares
are
para que no
being
paguen
given
luz.
solar panels, so they don't have to pay for electricity.
Otro ejemplo,
Another example
separar la basura solo en
is
dos
the
colores.
separation of trash in two colors:
Negro,
black,
todo lo que es basura. Y verde, todo lo reciclable.
green, everything that's recyclable.
Y todo lo reciclable lo maneja la iniciativa privada.
And that which is recyclable is being handled by the private sector.
Entonces,
Therefore,
si los gobiernos ponen el ejemplo,
if governments lead by example,
el pueblo
the people
empieza también a cuidar y a tener
will
conciencia
begin
de la
to partake
importancia de cuidar el medio
in taking
ambiente.
care of the environment and have consciousness when it comes to protecting it.
Gracias.
Thank you. Gentlemen.
Yes, my background is the economy, and I'm economist. From economist point of view, the two things I'd like to say. First point is, of course, the increase renewable power, because the energy demand is the same. So we talk about phasing out fossil fuel. However, if still the energy demand is the same, so something necessary. So that I think the renewable should be used first because the cost is lower. So I think if the increase of renewable is increasing, automatically the fossil fuel will be reduced. First thing we should do is increase renewable. For that purpose, I think one of the technical and effective option is put the price on emission, carbon price. That is the first option, first thing to do. And the second point that I recommend to the policy people is how to set up a kind of safety net for fossil fuel industry. So if fossil fuel is decreasing, like Indian coal and the Mexican oil and industry, so the company need to redundant their employees. So they have their family, and the local economy is rely on fossil fuel industry. How to care about the socially damaged people? I think they're pushing the renewable and care of the socially affected people and region. The two things need to be combined. That is my recommendation as a, I myself as an economist recommendation.
Thank you. Mr. Gupta.
Yeah, I completely agree that what is called just transition is an absolute must. The thing is, as of today, you can get a unit of solar power at 5 US cents, which is less than what you would pay for a unit of power from coal or oil or gas. The trouble is you don't get it 24 by 7. And so the moment you add storage, which is usually in the form of batteries, it goes above. It becomes uncompetitive. So what I think is, and I know that globally this is one of the biggest areas of research right now. So I do think that legislators can hopefully push more R&D money into energy storage, and that would be a big help.
Thank you very much. So, gentlemen, I'm going to invite you to make a final comment and let's start wrapping this up. Anything you think is fundamental that parliamentarians really need to take on board in terms of the future of our children, the future of our planet, and what role laws play in this, and how we can actually enact them to make a better tomorrow. Because we are, at the end of the day, leaving this to future people who are not even born yet. And what legacy do we want to have? What legacy, what role do parliaments play in leaving humanity's legacy?
Yes, I think the benefit of climate change action, I think mostly the benefit will be obtained by the future generation. So I mentioned about the carbon pricing, carbon price. So our generation, we need to bear the cost of the mitigation. But I think the benefit of the current and today's carbon pricing would be handed over and obtained by the future generation. So one thing we have to think about is the cost of adaptation, and compared to the mitigation cost, today's mitigation cost. So how to calculate, how to think about the today's cost and the future cost. I think the policy people think about a long-term strategy and the comparison of the today's cost and the future cost. That is my recommendation.
Well, okay. Very quickly, I completely take the point that politicians will look at the next election cycle because that's what they need to do for the re-election. So that climate action has suffered for many decades as a result of this. But now we have climate actions available, especially in the area of pushing renewables, where you can see the benefits within the next election cycle in terms of lower electricity bills to start with. And those actually are vote catchers. So I think it's important that politicians look at those, including adaptation actions, which can again have immediate impact. And if you have voters who are either farmers or fishers, they need adaptation actions urgently. And those adaptation actions, there is a whole suite of them. I'll not go into the details. Those adaptation actions do show immediate results.
Es muy
It's
importante
very important,
el trabajo de los parlamentarios.
the work that parliaments do.
Yo he sido 5 veces
I have been a
parlamentario
parliamentarian 5 times,
y he dejado un legado
and I've left a legacy
en pro del medio ambiente.
for the environment.
Voy a decir algunas
I'm going to say a
leyes
couple of
que
laws
he
that
hecho
I have
en bien del medio ambiente.
made or passed in the benefit of the environment.
Una, Agencia del Cambio
First of all,
Climático.
Agency of Climate Change.
educación ambiental obligatoria.
Environmental education, obligatory.
3,
Three,
el separar la basura en los
the
dos colores.
separation of residues, rubbish.
Crear una procuraduría ambiental para castigar a quien no cuida el medio
Create
ambiente.
a public prosecutor's office to punish those who do not take care of the environment.
Fomentar el crecimiento de los apiarios, que haya más abejas para que haya más reforestación natural.
Encourage the ¿los qué?
Reforestación natural a través de las abejas con apiarios.
Encourage natural reforestation through beekeepers and the natural existence of bees in the environment.
Menos impuestos a los carros
Less
eléctricos.
taxes for electric vehicles.
Más movilidad en transporte público
More
y
public
caminando,
transport mobility as well as walking,
entre otras muchas.
amongst many others.
El legado de un parlamentario
The legacy of a parliamentarian,
es un honor que dura 3
is
años
an
en México.
honor that lasts for 3 years in Mexico.
No hacerlo bien es una vergüenza que dura
To
para
not
toda la
do
vida.
it properly is a shame that lasts for a lifetime.
Gracias.
Thank you. And now I open the floor. Thank you. Gracias. Arigato. And I now would like to open the floor to any questions, if there are any questions. Yes, sir.
My name is Yusuf, and I'm from Nigeria. And first of all, I want to commend the speakers for the interesting discussion. These here are parliamentarians, right? They make laws for us. And one of the things I want to draw to their attention is how many of these countries have law on climate change? Like for Nigeria, we have the National Council on Climate Change, which is a law of the parliament, which Honorable Sam did actually push for us to have. So that is the first step for the country to have a law on climate change. Then the next thing is the issue of budget. What are you budgeting for? And things that you're budgeting for, do they have climate action engagement? Are they activities that actually help to deal with emission and, mitigation and adaptation? So I think if we start looking at it from that angle, parliamentarians will actually do better in trying to better the life or the future of not just their countries, but the globe. So I want to stop here, but basically is to draw our attention to these questions I've raised. That do you have climate change policy? Law in your country? Then if you have that, then where are you pushing the money to? Are you still pushing them to the fossil fuel, areas, or you're pushing them to renewable energy area? I want to agree with you that when you invest more in renewable energy, you don't need to tell people to stop using fossil fuel. If, for instance, I have access to electric vehicle that I charge it, like almost free, I don't need to pay to get a petrol to take me to where I want to go to. So automatically, my petrol usage will go down. So investing in renewable energy will surely take down the use of fossil fuel. Thank you so much.
Gentlemen, who would like to go first?
Yes, I think I would like to.
There's a lot of noise now.
Oh yeah, yes, I would like to say 2 things. First point is renewable. So I think for the more use of renewable, a key point is infrastructure. So they are like electricity grid and the power storage, etc. That is not commercially invested a lot. So maybe it's a role of the government because this is infrastructure. And one more thing I'd like to add is climate finance. So the industry and the financing institution and many private sector would like to make an investment if the investment climate is good. So what is the key of investment climate for climate change mitigation investment? It's the carbon pricing, as you said. So how many countries have the adopted carbon pricing policy? So where the developed carbon pricing mechanism are there, regulation are there, more and more investment. So maybe the finance will come later after the investment by the manufacturer and the industries. Two things.
Yeah, I agree with you that almost all countries definitely all countries need to have laws in place to handle climate change. And think most countries now actually have them. I think implementing those laws is more important and that's where your second point that you make is very important as to in which direction are countries moving their national budgets. Are they moving it towards old industries or new and clean and green industries? I would also like to support my fellow panelists' point on transmission and distribution because I personally find that this has become the big bottleneck in India. There is a huge amount of solar and wind being generated, which the national grid is unable to pick up because the national grid, it is not private, it's state-owned, and they don't have the money to upgrade it. That is one of the big challenges right now, and that is something we need to handle. Transmission and distribution of electricity is a big, big issue.
Gracias.
Thank you.
En México
In Mexico,
hay una
there's
ley que hizo
a law that was
el Instituto
passed,
Nacional de
the
Cambio Climático.
the National Institute of Climate Change.
Y el Instituto Nacional de Cambio
And this
Climático
institute
apoya con dinero
supports with money, with
para
funds,
que tú en tu casa
so that you in
tengas
your home
energía solar
have solar energy
y pagues
and
muy poco dinero.
pay very little
Yo pago $5
for
por
electricity.
mes.
I pay $5 a month.
En México
In Mexico,
tenemos una radiación
we have
excelente
amazing sunlight
para producir
to
energía
produce
solar.
solar energy.
Y el gobierno
And the government
ha instalado granjas
has
solares de
solar
las
farms
más grandes de Latinoamérica.
amongst the biggest in Latin America.
Estas granjas
These
solares
solar power facilities
apoyan la energía pública.
support the public energy.
También se obtiene energía
And we also get energy
de la basura, del metano.
from the methane that is emitted by
Y
trash.
de esa manera
And this way,
se reduce el
we
uso
reduce
de
the
los
use of
hidrocarburos.
fossil fuels.
En México
In
también
Mexico, we also
el tema de financiamiento hacia los carros eléctricos
Deal with the
está
funding.
creciendo
the funding of electrical vehicles is increasing.
para dejar de
So
utilizar
that we can
los
leave
que
behind
gastan
the
gasolina.
use of fossil fuel run vehicles.
El producir energía con solar
Using solar power
en México
in Mexico
te ayudan con dinero
is subsidized,
para que tú
so
puedas tener tu propia producción
you
de
can
energía
have
solar.
your own solar power production.
Se hizo una ley que se
There
llama
was a
FIDE
law called FIDE,
y de ahí te dan créditos
and through which you get credit
para que tú
to
generes tu propia
generate
energía
your own energy.
eléctrica. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm from Uganda, and I'm a parliamentarian from Uganda, and she's from Uganda, from Uganda, from Uganda, from Uganda. So there's a number of us here. I just wanted to thank you so much for your presentation and to ask maybe finally, with a woman president in Mexico now, and on the other side, there's some women who've lost elections, big elections. But what is the role, according to the three of you, of women legislators in climate action? What would you say is unique that they bring in the climate agenda? What advice would you give us as majority women in parliaments all over the world? Thank you. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Es muy importante que los
It's very important
parlamentarios
that parliamentarians
vayan con las mismas ideas que el
go with the
presidente.
same ideas that the president has.
Y la presidenta
And the president, Sheinbaum in this case, of
va
Mexico,
muy de las ideas con los parlamentarios.
goes hand in hand with the ideas of the parliamentarians.
Ella tiene un lema muy bonito.
She has a very beautiful slogan.
No gané yo,
I didn't win,
ganaron todas las mujeres.
women win.
Porque haremos
Because we will
políticas públicas
create public policy
para disminuir
to reduce
la violencia hacia la mujer.
violence against women.
Segundo,
Secondly,
tener los mismos salarios
have
que
the
los
same
hombres, las
salaries as
mujeres.
men.
Tercero,
Thirdly,
tener el mismo número de mujeres
have
y
the
hombres en el
same-
gobierno
a number of women in government as men. Equal number. Parity.
y generar instituciones
And generate institutions
y leyes
and laws
que respalden todo
that
esto.
back all of this.
Por otro lado,
On the other hand,
a todas las mujeres
to
mayores de
all
60
women
años
above 60 years of age,
les dan
they
mensualmente
give them monthly
entre 200 y 300
between
dólares de
$200
ayuda.
and $300 of help, of aid.
Y la mujer
And
que es violentada por un
a
hombre
woman who is attacked by a man
es muy castigada.
suffers a lot.
Y en el caso del cambio
And in the
climático,
case of climate change,
es claro
it is clear
que la mujer tiene más conciencia a cuidar el medio
that
ambiente
women have far more consciousness when it comes
por
to
sus
taking care
hijos
of
y
the
por su
environment,
familia.
because of their children, because of their families, because of their caregiver status.
Y por ello la presidenta
And therefore, that is why the president
ha enfocado las
has
políticas
focused
públicas
public policy
mucho hacia la mujer, emparejarla
specifically
con el hombre
on
o
women
superarla.
and to equalize them or push them above the men.
Ella es científica y
She's a
ambientalista
scientist and an environmentalist.
y no nos queda duda
And we have no doubt
que hará justicia
that
hacia
she
la
will
mujer
bring justice for
en su
women
deuda histórica
in the historic debt
que nunca se
that
había
has never
puesto una atención
been
especial
given specifically to
a la
women.
gran problemática de la mujer con leyes e
With
instituciones
laws, with institutions,
y políticas públicas
and
hacia la
public
mujer.
policies dedicated to women.
Ganó con 35 millones de
She won with
votos.
35 million votes.
Gracias.
Gentlemen.
Yes, I'm living in Japan, and I have been touched upon environment and climate policy in Japan for many years. And one of the impressive thing for me is former Minister of Environment, and Yuriko Koike. Now she became a governor of Tokyo Metropolitan Government, and she was deputy chair of Global International. She actually leading the Japanese climate and environment policy. So I think a kind of leadership that is important, and she demonstrated everything very well. So that I think the outcome was extremely big and important. But one thing my observation is she was and still she is a top runner. However, the middle class is not so strong. The presence is not so good because of a kind of scientific experience and the scientific knowledge is not good at. So even though they're speaking very well, but it's not, it's important, but it is just only a limitation. How to using the scientific experience. So gradually, the scientific background, environment ladies are increasing, but still, in case of Japan, little bit weak point.
See, I've covered many election campaigns in many countries. And I've always found women candidates are actually far better at empathizing with the day-to-day problems of their voters, especially domestic issues. I have never found a male candidate talk about cooking fuel. I've often found women candidates talk about cooking fuel. And these things are getting more and more important with climate change because they're getting scarcer and scarcer. In your country and mine, women are spending more hours every day fetching water thanks to climate change. So it's, I think, absolutely essential that A, we have more women legislators at every level, and B, that women legislators do something to educate your male counterparts.
Thank you very much. We have time for one last question.
Hola. Hi, my name is Jenny. I'm a congresswoman in Mexico. I'm happy to be here. And I wanted to say to you that even Mexico has half and half women and men being legislator. There is a challenge of education in climate challenge. That's why I would like to ask every of you, ¿cuál es el desafío para legisladoras mujeres para generar un cambio en su país? What is the challenge as women? Because now we have a seat, we have a chair, but we are not giving much time to get much knowledge about that. And we need to be educated because we have a seat that we didn't have before. So that's why I want you to say thank you.
En México
In Mexico,
hay una frase
there is a phrase
de Kofi Annan
that comes from Kofi Annan,
que decía,
who said,
cuando hay un cambio de gobierno
when there is a government change or
y
shift,
no hay cambio de
and there's
instituciones,
not a shift in institutions,
no hay cambio de
there is
leyes,
no shift in laws,
no hay cambio de
there is
programas,
no shift in policy,
entonces lo demás es pura
then
hablar y hablar.
everything is just blah, blah, blah.
Por ello,
That is why
es tan
it
importante
is so important
que las mujeres que por
women
primera
who
vez
for the first time
tienen el poder de
have
decidir en favor
to decide in favor of
del medio ambiente, de la
environment
gente,
of people
dejen un legado,
must leave a legacy,
aunque sea pequeño.
even if it's a small one.
Lo menos que pueden
The
hacer
least they can do,
es desaprovechar la
the
oportunidad
worst thing they can do is not to take advantage
y
of the
deben
opportunity
capacitarse,
to build themselves up,
venir a las COP
come to COPs,
y lo aprendido,
and that which is learned,
aplicarlo,
apply it.
dejar su legado
Leave their legacy
para construir
so
una
they
nación
can build a nation,
igualitaria entre
an
hombres y
equal
mujeres.
nation amongst men and women.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Ma'am, you and Takahashi-san are actually making the same point. There is an urgent need to communicate in simple layperson's terms that here's climate change and here are the impacts you're seeing in your daily lives. That making that connection, communicating that connection in layperson's terms to the entire population, especially women, there is definitely an urgent need. Yes.
Yes, and I provide a lecture to the in a university, and in my experience, the good thing for me is more than half of the students are ladies, and most of the students raise a question at the lecture, ladies. So as far as I know, women are very active and very interested in environment and climate change. So that means they could be a leader. And I think such kind of movement continued. So I think the big change will be occurred. So as I mentioned, the important thing is a combination and using science. Science means natural science and the social science, like me, economics. So just technology and just natural science is not enough. How to combine the economic approach? So I recommended to put the more education, not only the university but also junior high school or high school. Education is, as you said, is very important.
Thank you very much to our honorable guests. Thank you so much for those invaluable contributions. But also, I would like to thank our even more honorable, if that's possible, audience. Thank you so much for your attention and for being here. Really appreciate it. And of course, this is your home at the Parliamentary Pavilion. Thank you so much for your attention, and let's keep on fighting the good fight for tomorrow, for our children, and for the planet. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Gracias.